Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, not much good depending on your location. Please join in the struggle to liberate our people from the contraption. Like and share videos. Nuro luayo, na nuro luayo. Nuro luayo, na nuro luayo. Ọ dịghị mgbe ike mmadụ ga-akarị ike Chukwu. Ọ dịghị mgbe ike Nigeria ga-akarị ike Biafra. Nna nuro, onye kere ụwa nuro luayo. Nna nuro, Olisa binigwe nuro akwayo. Now, the news updates.
The African continent watched in silence as Nigeria held Nnamdi Kanu in indefinite detention, but that silence was broken the day South African President Cyril Ramaphosa stepped up and said, "Enough." A sharp, unfiltered message from Ramaphosa himself, demanding Nnamdi Kanu's immediate release, citing court rulings from both Kenya and Nigeria. The continued detention of Mr. Nnamdi Kanu violates the spirit of Pan-African justice. South Africa cannot stand idly while another African court ruling is trampled on by political interest. Kenya's High Court had already ruled Kanu was kidnapped, renditioned, detained illegally, but Abuja ignored it. Now, South Africa stepping in not just as a nation, but as Africa's second largest democracy. What future do we build if African rulings are ignored by African governments? Today it is Nnamdi Kanu, tomorrow it could be any one of us.
Of course.
Nigeria must act not for him, but for Africa. We can't afford a diplomatic war with Pretoria. But releasing Kanu will unleash political chaos at home. The choice was clear. But neither option was safe. South Africa's stance ignited global outrage. Diaspora groups rallied behind Ramaphosa, demanding Tinubu answer the call of justice. Kanu is not the crime, abduction is. Obey the law. Rumors spread of a quiet deal, one that could involve conditional release, strategic silence, or even a trade in diplomatic favor. Options are on the table: release Kanu and lose the political upper hand, or face full-blown continental isolation. As the sun will answer the call of justice. Kanu is not the crime, abduction is. Obey the law. Rumors spread of a quiet deal, one that could involve conditional release, strategic silence, or even a trade in diplomatic favors. But at what cost? As tensions rise, Tinubu convenes a late-night meeting. Options are on the table: release Kanu and lose the political upper hand, or face full-blown continental isolation. As the sun rose over Nigeria, President Bola Tinubu was already seated with his most trusted advisors. Ramaphosa's letter was no longer just paper, it was pressure. The first response wasn't diplomatic, it was legal. The Nigerian government, through its Justice Department, began crafting a position: Kanu's case is a domestic matter. Studio microphone narrator. Tinubu wasn't going to respond alone. Sources say calls were made across West Africa to leaders seen as neutral, asking for their patience or support. Within hours, the Nigerian media narrative shifted. Spokespersons emphasized national interest, the complexity of legal appeals, and subtly reminded the public of Nigeria's leadership in Africa. Despite diplomatic noise, the Department of State Services issued no statement. But insiders say the directive remained clear: maintain current detention protocols. African Union leadership received position papers from both sides. South Africa's argument cited judicial precedent. Nigeria's letter emphasized non-interference. The Union encourages dialogue, legal clarity, and adherence to established rulings from all member states. As heads of state debated legality, human rights groups reignited their message: the issue wasn't politics, it was due process. The question is simple: was Nnamdi Kanu given a fair trial? If not, why is he still in detention? Studio microphone narrator. Within Nigeria, not everyone agreed with the hard stance. Some lawmakers feared that international criticism could damage Nigeria's credibility at the next AU summit. We cannot be seen as ignoring rulings, especially when we expect others to respect ours. Days after the letter, Ramaphosa reportedly called President Tinubu directly. According to diplomatic aides, the tone was professional but firm. We respect South Africa's concern. But Nigeria answers to its own courts, not its neighbors. In just 2 weeks, African leaders will meet face to face. And Kanu's case, once confined to Nigerian courtrooms, now stands before an entire continent. The standoff has only just begun and the pressure is building. For months, the case of Nnamdi Kanu remained Nigeria's business. But now, in the heart of Africa's political capital, it was placed on the table before the entire continent. It is not our place to judge individual nations, but it is our duty to uphold the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. That duty compels us to act. For the first time since Kanu's detention, the AU acknowledged it publicly. It wasn't a condemnation, but it was pressure. One by one, African leaders were called into quiet consultations. Ramaphosa reaffirmed his position. Kenya's legal delegation presented its court ruling. Nigeria held firm, but its circle was shrinking. The High Court in Nairobi ruled this rendition violated our law. If we expect global respect, Africa must begin by respecting its own rulings. Yes. EW had seen the documents laid out in such detail. Some delegates were reportedly stunned. We respect the rule of law, but we must also respect sovereign processes. Nnamdi Kanu faces legal proceedings at home in accordance with Nigerian law. It was calm. It was firm. But to some, it sounded defensive. Perhaps it is time for an AU-appointed human rights observer to visit Mr. Kanu and report independently. The suggestion changed the tone of the room. Now it wasn't just about law, it was about access, accountability, and optics. Behind the firm stance was a growing realization Nigeria's approach would need to evolve or it would be defined for them. We do not seek to undermine Nigeria. But if rulings are ignored, we all risk instability. Let us find a path that respects justice and face no winners or losers. His tone had shifted. It wasn't confrontation now, it was leadership. The African Union proposed a resolution, an advisory review panel to evaluate the detention and recommendations for all sides. It wasn't binding, but it was historic. Where rulings have been issued, member states are encouraged to engage in good faith legal review and provide access to neutral monitors to assess compliance. The spotlight was now fixed, not just on a government, but on its choices, its image, and its commitment to the principles it helped write. Africa was no longer silent. But would Nigeria listen or dig deeper into isolation? As pressure mounted from the African Union, Nigeria's national security architecture began preparing for a scenario they once deemed impossible: Nnamdi Kanu walks free. At the core of the dilemma was a question: if the courts had spoken, both in Kenya and Nigeria, what legal framework justified continued detention? We need a position that acknowledges international concerns, but reaffirms sovereignty. We may propose a conditional review. Tinubu's advisors mapped out how different political blocs might respond. Would releasing Kanu spark support or criticism? Could it strengthen the opposition? If we time it near the next appeal ruling, we control the narrative. But if it looks like we bow to outside pressure, we lose public trust. In times of uncertainty, the Nigerian government often turns to the moral compass of the people, faith leaders, monarchs, and community elders. Peace must be preserved, but justice must not be politicized. Using internal polling and simulation models, government consultants played out how Nigerians would respond from celebration to confusion. Over 60% say if Kanu is freed after this long, they'll believe something was being hidden. We must manage perception. Though quiet publicly, the Nigerian armed forces also weighed in. The priority wasn't legal, it was national stability. After the AU's public remarks, other international observers took note. Diplomats began asking quiet but serious questions. Has the detention passed due process, or has it become indefinite without new charges? Okay. What's the timeline? In the final analysis, 3 options remain on the table. Maintain detention, delay further, citing national security. Conditional release, offer monitored freedom under court supervision. Full release, legal explanation, tied to Nigerian court judgment and call for reconciliation. This should not have taken international intervention. If a court ruled, the government should have followed. Yeah. It's time to rebuild public trust. Opposition voices grew louder, not just on Kanu, but on the larger idea of constitutional consistency. As options narrowed, a new whisper emerged, a potential compromise, a conditional release reviewed by Nigerian courts under AU supervision. No victor, no defeat, just a way out. We are open to dialogue, but Nigeria will never be dictated to. Far from the courtrooms of Nigeria or the corridors of the African Union, one voice has continued to start tension from abroad: Simon Ekpa. Activist, commentator, and to many, a polarizing figure. Nnamdi Kanu is not the issue. The real problem is Nigeria refusing to recognize what the people have demanded.
My people, don't hear them now. What do you make of it? Drop your comments. But remember, it's Biafra or nothing. Bye for now.